And so we all have these epigenetics in our DNA, and they discovered this, and they call it methyl. And it's in all mammals, and they call it epigenetic marks. And their main function is to shut down what are called transposons. And what they would do is they actually separate themselves from a sequence of DNA, and they'll move to a different segment. And this can cause diseases and just diseases. And another main function of the epigenetic marks is to regulate normal genes. And epimutations are the mutations of these epigenetic marks, and they can be caused by harmful chemicals or stresses or different things we come in contact with. And they can cause diseases and even cancer. And so they wondered if these epimutations can be passed down from generation to generation. And so tests were being conducted on rats to study the reproductive effects of these different chemicals. And one of the chemicals was methoxychlor, and another one was vinclozolene, and they were both used as pesticides and fungicides in the agricultural world. And so they would inject it into the pregnant female rats during the second week of gestation. And during that second week is usually when the male eggs would develop their testicles. And so what it would do is it would disrupt the processes of the reproduction. And so the male rats would have weak sperm, and they would not be able to reproduce as many or as strong rats, and so they would all die. And so these test rats were not meant to be bred, but by accident, unrelated male and female rats mated. And Michael Skinner, he thought that nothing would actually come of it. He's like, oh, well, let's just see what happened. And actually 90% of the grand pups from the original rats had the same abnormalities as both generations before them. And so that was pretty crazy. And then so they started doing these tests on other things such as plants, flies, worms, fish, pigs, and they started using different chemicals to see what else could cause these mutations. And so dioxin, jet fuel, insect repellents, and P07-A. And so despite the mounting evidence, most biologists didn't want to believe that this was true, because that means all these agricultural people would not be able to use these products on their plants, and so all their crops would be killed by all the insects since they're not using the pesticides. And so they started doing their own tests, and most of the tests did not come to the same conclusion. And Michael Skinner believes that they didn't come to the same conclusion because they would use different methods of putting the stress or chemicals on the rats. Like he would inject it, he would just inject it straight into the pregnant rats. Some people would give it to them orally, or they would do different things, and so that's why they would have different results. And they would also use different rats that weren't even part of the experiments. They would just use normal rats, and they would breed them with infected rats, and so that's why all the numbers were skewed. And then there's also this other thing that happens during the reproductive process that actually just erases and reprograms all the epigenetic marks to keep us from having those epimutations. And so that's just God, I guess. Studies are being conducted, so they were being conducted on humans to see if the same thing would happen in humans as they would in rodents. And so there was a chemical explosion in 1976 in Seveso, Italy, and it made this high amount of dioxin in the atmosphere. And they did a study on the women in 2010, and 25% of the females had the same reproductive mishaps as their grandparents, and the fertility rate was 50%. So that means only half of the grandchildren could get pregnant, and so that kind of sucked. And so this was just a little chart that was in the actual article, and it just gave some of the exposures and what they did, and then it would give what would be passed down. So like some of them would be, some of the rats would be conditioned to fear this certain type of odor. They would make bad things happen whenever this certain odor came. And so the grandpups, when this odor was present, they would become nervous. And then a lot of the different generations developed obesity rates, high obesity rates. And so I think that's one of the things that's one of the reasons that's why so many people are obese today. Is maybe something during World War II, some stresses during World War II just caused us to, these epi mutations be passed down. And that is the end of my slide.
Any question?
Any questions?
So the article describe any certain mechanisms how those kind of epi mutations can kind of pass down?
Yeah, if the erasers didn't catch them, then they could be passed down. And that was like,
The eraser.
yeah.
Thank you. Joe?
Can I make a quick announcement?
Yes, sure.
We have a DME club meeting today at